The Pixel 9 Pro and the Sony A7C have been designed with different purposes in mind. The Pixel is obviously a phone which can do many more things apart from photo and video, but the Sony A7C is a dedicated mirrorless camera. Can the Pixel keep up? Let's find out. Before starting this comparison, let's make something very clear. Imagine this is the size of the full-frame sensor. This is the same sensor used in the Sony A7C, while this is the size of the Pixel 9 Pro's sensor. Obviously, this is highly disadvantaged and this sensor can fit over 9 times inside a full-frame sensor, as you can see here. Okay, so getting this comparison started, we have the Pixel 9 Pro image on the left while we have the Sony A7C image on the right. This will be the standard positioning of all the images that we're going to compare in the next parts. So, at face value, I can immediately see that both shots are really nice. Both of them are quite sharp and crisp, and I can see that the color reproduction is very good. One thing you can notice at this zoom level is immediately that the Sony A7C has better sharpness, better crispness in the detail areas. Although the Pixel 9 Pro image is not bad at all, when compared to the Sony A7C, the comparison clearly shows that the details are much better for the Sony. If we zoom in to a particular area on the image, you can see that the Sony A7C obviously outshines the Pixel 9 Pro quite a lot in terms of sharpness, in terms of detail that is retained at this particular zoom level. But obviously this is at 100% crop. So if we go back, to me it feels like the Pixel 9 Pro did a very good job. However, the Sony A7C outshines the Pixel due to its bigger sensor and its better hardware. Moving on to the second image, we have some pumpkins right here, and immediately what you can see is that the Pixel's image is slightly more saturated. The oranges look a bit brighter, a bit more colorful, while the Sony A7C image is a bit more natural and is a bit more sharp overall, while the Pixel's image seems to be sharpened in specific places while not in others. So it seems like the focus areas are really right here on the Pixel, while on the Sony the image is sharp all over, so to speak. The color reproduction in both is very nice. I have to say that the Pixel has really punchy colors here, but in terms of the pinks right here, you can see that the Sony outshines the Pixel in the punchiness of the color. Having said that, if we zoom into the shadow areas, you can see that the Sony A7C suffers from a lot of grain at this particular light level, while the Pixel really shows its true colors in terms of Google's post-processing, which really eliminates any noise in the shadow areas. Moving on to the next image, my cat wouldn't stay in the same exact position, so I have to share different images of the cat, but anyway, the picture is as close to the other as possible, and immediately you can see that color reproduction once again is very good. Both of them have very similar colors, and keep in mind that I have adjusted white balance to make them as close as possible. So at this particular zoom level, to me it looks like the Pixel 9 Pro image is actually sharper than the image on the Sony. Having said that, the Sony has better depth of field, while the Pixel 9 Pro obviously does not have that nice depth of field because of the limit in the hardware used. But zooming into the images at 100%, now you can see why the image of the Pixel 9 Pro looks sharper while the image of the Sony A7C looks less sharp, and that is because there's a bit more grain and noise in the Pixel's image, probably due to being a bit low in light, while the Sony retains the noise at very minimum levels here. So I'm quite impressed at the noise levels of the Sony, since this is actually a low light shot. You can see the grain and the noise levels in the Pixel 9 Pro's image in these particular areas and they're quite harsh, and you can see none of that in the Sony's image. So once again, the Sony wins out, but obviously that is expected due to its better hardware. I was quite impressed at the sharpness levels and at the focus level of the Pixel 9 Pro in this particular image, because at this particular zoom level, which is the way that you would view it on a mobile phone, it looks actually really sharp, while the Sony's image looks a bit softer at this particular zoom level. Moving on to the next image, this is possibly where the Pixel 9 Pro actually impressed me most. So at this particular zoom level, you cannot see much difference. The colors are slightly different, but that's due to the white balance being taken at different positions on the background. Yet you can see that the sharpness of the overall image of both of them are quite on point, and as soon as you zoom in to 100% crop, you can see that the Pixel 9 Pro does an amazing job at retaining sharpness, at making sure that everything is in focus, and you can see this both in the detail on the finger as well as the detail on the camera itself. You can see that there's this dust right here, the edges are sharp, the text is sharp as well, possibly even sharper than the Sony's image. You can also see that the sharpness at this particular area where the lens is, both of them have retained sharpness very, very well. This is possibly where we can see that the Sony focused possibly on this particular area, on the lens area, while the Pixel has probably focused on the body of the camera. However, I think that the Pixel is on par with the Sony's image in this particular test. Let's take a look at noise, for example. You can see this slight aberration on the Pixel's image, and you can see that the Sony is actually much noisier than the Pixel's image. So I would say that the Pixel has impressed me quite a lot in this particular image, and I would probably lean onto the Pixel's image for detail and sharpness overall, while I would lean onto the Sony's image for color reproduction, because the color of the skin, for example, is much better looking here, and even the dark areas look much better in this particular shot. However, very impressed with the Pixel 9 Pro performance in this particular shot. Moving on to the next image. In this image you can see that we're focusing on something which is closer and which is also quite small, so the detail will show even better if it is on point or not. So right here, two things to note is the detail of the item of the subject in focus, as well as the creaminess of the background, which is due to a better depth of field. So the Sony immediately outshines the Pixel in this particular area, but if we zoom in onto the subject itself, you can see that the Pixel actually retains a lot of detail. I would say that the level of detail on the Pixel is on par with that of the Sony, even though the image is taken at slightly different angles, but the level of detail in both is quite close. If we zoom in a bit further, you can once again see that the Pixel suffers from less noise than the Sony, and for this I would say that the Pixel actually is on par with the Sony. Apart from the depth of field, which is obviously way off, but that is due to the hardware that is being used, I would say that the Sony and the Pixel are doing very well in both instances, and the Pixel is holding its ground quite well. Moving on to the next image, this image is shot in better lighting conditions to the others because I had a window close by, and at this particular zoom level you can see that the subjects are in focus, quite sharp as an image, and color reproduction is quite good as well. I would say that the focus of the Sony is obviously more focused on the cow, while the Pixel has focused on the cow quite well, but the other subjects are a bit more in focus than what you can see on the Sony. When comparing the two in terms of higher zoom levels, let's go to 100 crop, you can see that the Pixel actually outshines the Sony in terms of focus, even though there is more sharpness in this particular area. But to me, it looks much better. It is sharp overall and does not introduce any noise, while the Sony image actually introduces a lot of noise even in the bright parts of the image. This can also be seen if we move on to the subjects on the right. You can see that the Pixel retains that creamy texture to the image, while the Sony is practically full of noise in all areas. The only little noise that you can see on the Pixel's image is in this shadow area behind this vase right here. And then again, the noise is very, very minimal, while on the Sony image, the noise is quite extreme, I would say, for this particular shot and for this particular level of light. Moving on to the final image, we have my cat once again. And right here, you can see how the Sony image outshines the Pixel's image. Immediately you can see that the Sony image is more in focus, better detail on my cat's nose, better detail in terms of the fur. And if we zoom in to 100% crop, you can see how much of that detail is retained in the crop, while the Pixel really had a hard time keeping everything in focus right here. Color reproduction is very good in both of them. I would say that the Pixel is slightly overexposed in this area, while the Sony is quite balanced. And the overall images are both really good, but I would obviously choose the Sony's image if I had to decide which one to use for anything else other than just sharing to social media. I would say with these 7 images compared, the Sony outshines the Pixel by quite a big margin in terms of detail and in terms of sharpness, but it suffers from a lot of noise in shadow areas. On the other hand, the Pixel has outshined the Sony in 2 particular images, I would say, in the image of this camera right here and in the image of this object which is close by. And you can see that the details were retained really well in both of these images. Obviously, because of the hardware difference, because of the larger sensor size, because of the dedicated zoom hardware on the Sony A7C with a zoom lens, the images cannot be very close. With that said, I would say that the Pixel 9 Pro is a very good candidate for anyone who is looking for a small, lightweight camera system which is able to shoot RAW. You have also manual camera controls, and you also have a lot of Google Pixel smart features that enable you to take long exposure photos, enable you to move things around with editing on the phone itself. So the Pixel 9 Pro is a really good candidate for people who do not want to carry around a lot of stuff. If I had to decide whether to choose between the Pixel 9 Pro or the Sony A7C, I would say that, similar to what I said in the beginning, the purpose of each of them is different. I would carry the Sony A7C with me when I know that I want the perfect image. I know I want to shoot a great image to be able to print it later on or even sell it online, while the Pixel 9 Pro I would use for any photo that I need to take while I don't have my Sony with me. Having said that, I often end up regularly using the Pixel 9 Pro over the Sony, even when I'm on holiday. So if there's a particular scene that I would like to shoot quickly, I typically tend to choose the Pixel 9 Pro because it's way quicker, it's lighter to carry around, and it's obviously smaller. You just put it in your pocket, take it out whenever you want to shoot, and you're ready. While the Sony is a device that you would need to carry around with a strap in your bag and is quite slow in terms of taking it out, shooting photos with it compared to the Pixel 9 Pro. So there you have it, a comparison of the Pixel 9 Pro and the Sony A7C. I hope this helps you decide if you're considering the Pixel 9 Pro as your main camera system. Thank you for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe.